Two former inmates joined forces to rob big banks in ways that American law enforcement had never seen before. From Oklahoma to Washington and Arizona, these robbers stunned the FBI at every turn. And even when they were finally caught, the story wasn't over. Because in a jaw-dropping twist, the robbers staged a daring escape, returning to their spree with even more audacity and cunning. Using fake identities and a network of criminal connections, they stole millions without hesitation, slipping through the cracks and leaving the FBI on edge for nearly a decade. So, who were these men? How did they pull off so many heists without being caught? And how did they pull off a stunning prison escape? This story is packed with suspense, a mix of thrilling bank robberies and shocking prison breaks, so make sure to watch until the end. On 28 December 1982, Oklahoma City Bank Vice President Steve Thompson and his wife, Ellen, were just entering their garage when a car pulled in behind them. It was surprising for both Steve and Ellen because they weren't expecting anyone. Before they could comprehend the situation, two men from the car entered their garage while posing as federal agents. As Ellen Thompson asked them about their identification, one of them pulled out a gun and they took the Thompsons hostage in their own home. The men kept the Thompsons hostage overnight, but this was all part of their plan. They had a set of questions for Steve Thompson regarding the bank's security system, security layers, the people in charge of the safes, and the employees. While Steve Thompson didn't give the men the real names of his colleagues, fearing for their safety, he did share other information. The robbers were also in touch with someone else from outside and constantly sharing information Steve had been giving them. Soon, the Thompsons realized that the men weren't there to rob them. They were going to rob the Oklahoma City Bank. When the 29th December's sun rose, the robbers took the Thompsons to Steve's bank. One of the men was in contact with someone standing outside the bank who gave them a heads up whenever a person entered the bank. The robbers inside would ask if the employee had the keys or combinations to the bank's safe before deciding their next action. All those who didn't have the combination were locked in the restroom, whereas the employees with the combinations or keys were taken to the safe. It took the gunmen just 30 minutes to take hundreds of thousands of dollars from the Oklahoma City Bank and disappear in thin air. Although the bank employees were told to stay in the room, they were locked in for 5 minutes after the robbers had collected the money from the safe. Steve Thompson came out after a minute and a half and immediately reported the incident to the police. When the Oklahoma City police received the call regarding a robbery at a bank, they contacted the FBI as part of the standard procedure. The FBI Special Agent Mike Cycle was assigned by the federal agency to investigate the matter. Shortly after the call to the authorities by the bank, the police started arriving, followed by the FBI agents. Unsure of what was going on inside the bank, the police officers approached the bank quietly and cleared it to make sure there were no guns or explosives inside the building. The police had started interviewing the hostages when the FBI agents arrived on the scene, minutes later. In 1946, the U.S. lawmakers passed the Hobbs Act, which would make all federally insured banks the jurisdiction of the FBI. This meant one thing. It wouldn't just be the Oklahoma police searching for the robbers, but rather a nationwide force would go after the robbers to catch them. When the FBI agents interviewed the Thompsons, they told the agents that it was the night before when the whole episode began. When both the Thompsons' home and the Oklahoma City Bank were searched, one thing became clear to the authorities. It was a sophisticated crime in which the robbers made sure that no evidence was left behind. This also showed that this wasn't the first time these people had robbed a bank, but it was most likely that they had done similar crimes in the past as well. However, when the investigation began, the authorities were surprised to find out that there was no record of similar robberies in the past. That's when the federal agents searched the FBI database and looked for robberies in the same pattern anywhere in the country. A national file of robbery cases that included home invasions of bank employees was studied thoroughly, and that is when the FBI found that several incidents had happened in the past in different areas of the U.S. where the pattern of the crime had been very similar to the one they were investigating. The next thing for Special Agent Mike Cycle was to contact the relevant FBI offices in the country and find an agent who had investigated a similar case before. After a few phone calls in different offices, Mike interacted with Special Agent Steve Chenoweth in the FBI's Phoenix office. When Special Agent Cycle told Chenoweth about the bank robbery, the robbers' disguise, and mannerisms, the latter knew exactly who the bank robbers were: Terry Conner and Joseph Dardy. Law enforcement personnel had pointed out that all of these things were indeed typical of what they had done in the past. Given the similarity among the past behavior and the details of what had occurred in Oklahoma City, it became clear who the likely culprits were. The witness description, especially by Steve and Ellen Thompson, matched the felons. Since Chenoweth had already investigated a similar case and was well aware of the criminals at large, he became the lead case agent. Terry Conner and Joseph Dardy first met in a federal prison. By that time, Conner had done at least 3 bank robberies in Arizona and was the leader of his group in all of them. In each of those robberies, the bank employees were kept hostage overnight. As for Joseph Dardy, he was an ordinary thief from Philadelphia and believed more in his physical strength to rob people than his mental prowess. Conner, on the other hand, was a smart person and a smooth talker and would recruit his accomplices with ease. He belonged to the West Coast, so the FBI concentrated its efforts in California as well while searching for him. In this regard, the Monterey, California FBI resident agency was contacted, and Special Agent Harlan Fremeyer was given all the details about Terry Conner. The FBI suspected that Conner had a girlfriend who lived in Pacific Grove, California. The Monterey, California FBI resident agency was asked to keep an eye on his girlfriend in case Conner tried to make contact with her. Soon, the FBI California office started doing routine surveillance of Conner's girlfriend's home and discovered a possible link to Terry Conner. What was this lead? During a spot check that was conducted on the residence, a vehicle parked out front was identified. It had Oklahoma license plates on it. This appeared to be a bit suspicious. When Agent Fremeyer contacted the Oklahoma City office to check the plate number, they didn't have a record of that vehicle. The authorities assumed that Terry Conner might have purchased that car using a fake identity. When Conner's girlfriend was away, the FBI agents talked to a gardener in the area, told him about the investigation, and asked him to be truthful about everything he knew. The gardener was asked if he had recently seen any men entering or exiting Terry Conner's girlfriend's home. Although the gardener hadn't seen a male figure in or around the house, he told the agents he had heard the woman talking to someone over the phone planning a meetup in the following week. This made it clear to the FBI that Terry Conner was going to meet his girlfriend in a few days at an unknown location. The manhunt seemed to be going in the right direction for the FBI. For the next few days, the FBI agents followed the girlfriend and noticed that she used different cars for traveling. A tracking device was installed on each of those cars to monitor her activities using the receivers in FBI's planes and cars. On the day, Conner's girlfriend was to meet him. The signal of the tracking devices suddenly faded, which was surprising for the agency. Thanks to the airplane assistance, the agents on the ground were able to track her down once again. When the agents reached the location of the car, it was parked outside of a restaurant, but there was no sign of Terry Conner or his girlfriend. The FBI decided to do full coverage of the car in case a suspect tried to approach it. To make sure Terry and his girlfriend didn't run away, the agents deflated the car's tires. The wait was getting longer and longer, and there was no sign of Terry Conner until a car pulled up in the parking lot. It was Terry Conner and his girlfriend. Since he was known to carry weapons, a SWAT team secretly made their way to the parking lot and gave Terry no chance to escape. Both Conner and his girlfriend were arrested on the spot. After questioning the girlfriend, the FBI determined that she wasn't involved in Terry's activities and didn't know anything about the robbery in Oklahoma City Bank. Deflating the tires of Terry Conner's girlfriend's car unexpectedly helped the FBI. The agents couldn't search the vehicle without a warrant, but Terry had already opened his car's trunk when he got arrested, likely to get out a jack to fix his girlfriend's car's tires. Now the FBI had an open car trunk, the contents of which were right in front of the agents. In the trunk, one item was of particular interest to the agents: a briefcase. When the briefcase was opened, there was nearly $40,000 in it. What was even more interesting was that the serial numbers on some of the currency notes matched those stolen from the Oklahoma City Bank. A large diamond was also in the briefcase, along with a receipt for 6 more diamonds from a jeweler. Terry Conner was taken to the Monterey FBI office for interrogation and was charged with the Oklahoma City robbery. When Terry's personal belongings were searched, another interesting item emerged: a sales receipt from a Reno, Nevada car dealership. The buyer's name on the receipt was mentioned as Russell Anderson. The FBI suspected that it was one of many aliases used by Conner or Dardy. As for the address on the receipt, it said Santa Maria, California. Special Agent Harlan Fremeyer believed that the address on the receipt was of Terry Conner's partner, Joseph Dardy. Immediately after coming across the receipt, a message was sent to the Southern California office to check that address. When a SWAT team entered the relevant house in Santa Maria, they couldn't find anyone inside. It was suspected that the person occupying the house had been alerted by Terry Conner when he was allowed to make a call during the booking process. When word of Terry Conner's arrest reached the case agent, Chenoweth, he knew that, at some point, Dardy would use the tactics taught to him by Conner to rob another bank. But he was also aware that Dardy wasn't as smart as Terry Conner, and in the absence of his leader, it was likely that Dardy would make a mistake that could lead the authorities to him. The FBI waited for the next bank robbery in a similar pattern, but there wasn't any for the next 8 months, and neither was there any sign of Joseph Dardy. But then in 1983, in Phoenix, a night before Black Friday, the busiest shopping day of the year, when the vice president of a large area bank returned home with his family from a Thanksgiving dinner with relatives, the house seemed to have been burglarized. But before they could make anything of the situation, the intruders, who hadn't left, appeared from a room and pointed guns at the banker and his family. The family was taken hostage for the whole night, and the same pattern was used as in the bank robberies involving Terry Conner before. The next morning, before dawn, Joseph Dardy and his partner forced the family into the banker's car and drove for nearly 2 hours to get to the bank. Within a few minutes, the robbers had stolen nearly $270,000 cash and left. The crime was committed in Chenoweth's home city, the lead case agent on Dardy's trail. As soon as Chenoweth was informed about the robbery, he knew exactly who was behind it. But he couldn't be sure until he talked to the victims to get an actual description of the criminal. Soon after interviewing the banker and his family, Agent Chenoweth knew it was Joseph Dardy. But now there was another puzzle to solve. Dardy had recruited a crime partner, which the FBI didn't know anything about. The investigation also revealed that Dardy and his new crime partner were more violent than Terry Conner and Joseph Dardy. Time passed, and 6 months later, 900 miles from Phoenix, in Reno, Nevada, local police called the FBI and informed the agency about another robbed bank. This robbery had also followed the same pattern in which one of the bank officials and their family were taken hostage the night before. However, the level of violence was increased compared to the previous incidents. The criminals hadn't only robbed the bank, but strapped a bomb around the bank officer to threaten him and force him to do what they asked him to do. The bomb experts turned off the power supply of the bomb, but it was later discovered the bomb was fake and didn't contain any explosives. During the investigation, when the bank official was shown Joseph Dardy's photo, he immediately recognized him and told the agents one of the robbers looked like him. Different witnesses around the bank reported a white sedan with a Washington number plate had sped away from the bank after the robbery. When the agents searched the area, they found the car abandoned 200 yards from the FBI's office in Reno. When the plate number was run in the database, it was discovered that the car was registered to a man in Spokane, Washington. When the man was asked about the car, he told the authorities he had sold it to a person who fit the description of Joseph Dardy and a pregnant woman who was believed to be Dardy's girlfriend. To track down the criminals, U.S. Marshals who are experts in interstate tracking of cars and people were called on. U.S. Marshal Denny Barron believed that Joseph Dardy could be tracked using the cars he had used in his crimes. U.S. Marshals followed the complex track of cars and fake identities used by Joseph Dardy and finally got a breakthrough. Soon, the authorities came to a reported car incident, and the address on it linked it to one of Dardy's aliases to an address in Idaho. When the marshals visited the house, it was abandoned. So, they interviewed the people in the neighborhood. One of the neighbors immediately recognized Dardy when his photo was shown to him, but she only knew him by his fake name. The woman told the authorities that Dardy, his girlfriend, and their newborn child had recently moved out of the house. The authorities then secured a subpoena for moving truck rental records in the area. The U.S. Marshals believed that the truck must have been hired by Dardy's girlfriend using an alias. Inspecting the record showed that Dardy had moved to Colorado. The rental company also gave the destination of the truck to the authorities. It was a house in the mountains outside Denver. The FBI secretly started surveilling the house. After a while, the agents observed a couple leaving the house, but to their surprise, the man wasn't Joseph Dardy. The car was followed into the town to a store. The man and woman appeared to be without a baby. While the man and woman were in the store, the agents secretly checked the car's backseat, but there wasn't any baby in the car. This meant one thing: the baby was still at the house with Joseph Dardy. The FBI believed that they had finally found Joseph Dardy after a manhunt spanning 2 years in several states. The girlfriend confirmed that Dardy was inside the house with their newborn child. She also told the authorities that Dardy was armed. As Dardy fired blindly into the woods, the FBI agents held their breath, their fingers hovering over their triggers. But they knew one wrong move could endanger the child inside. The negotiator's voice echoed through the trees, steady and calm, trying to coax Dardy into surrendering. The agents were hidden in the woods and waiting for the next order when something unexpected happened. Joseph Dardy got out of the house armed with a gun and opened fire in the woods. Since Dardy was firing only at the FBI agents, the SWAT team in the nearby area kept silent. The fire wasn't returned by the agents because the FBI knew the situation needed to be resolved peacefully. Considering that there was an infant in the house, an FBI negotiator called the house Dardy was in and told him that he was surrounded from all sides and that it was better for him to surrender so his kid would stay unharmed. Instead of responding to the agent, Dardy hung up the phone. While it was easy to open fire at Dardy, the FBI wanted to make sure the child was safe. The FBI negotiator called the house once again and told him that his girlfriend and accomplice had already been arrested and urged Dardy to come out of the house peacefully, but he hung up the phone once again. This is when the FBI decided to move into the house. While the agents and the SWAT team approached the house, they saw Dardy coming to the door. He surrendered to the FBI and was arrested without struggle. After securing the baby and making sure no one else was in the house, the FBI discovered 16 firearms in the house, including a .308 tactical assault rifle. All the firearms were hidden but fully loaded to defend the house in case of a raid. Joseph Dardy was charged and held for trial in Oklahoma. With their freedom at stake, Conner and Dardy moved with speed and purpose, uncuffing themselves and overpowering the marshals with practiced precision. The countryside flashed by as they drove, adrenaline heightening their senses. For those few brief months, they were untouchable. On June 19, 1985, almost a year and a half after the capture of Dardy, 2 U.S. Marshals were taking Conner and Joseph Dardy to an Oklahoma City courthouse. Dardy had been made part of 4 trials, and this was the first of those trials, which included the charges for robbing the Oklahoma City bank 3 years earlier, along with his leader at the time, Conner. Conner was subpoenaed by Joseph Dardy as a witness in the case. Everything was going smoothly when a rural section of the road arrived. The criminals made their move and uncuffed themselves using smuggled jailhouse contraband, a razor blade, and a handcuff key. By this time, it was clear the former partners had no plan of going to the courthouse for their hearing. They took the marshals' guns, got the police vehicle pulled off the road, and marched the officers into the forest nearby. They tied the marshals with trees and fled the scene using the same car that was transporting them to the courthouse. Not only this, they also stole weapons and badges from the marshals. While the authorities in the courthouse waited for them to arrive, no one knew the criminals were now at large, mobile, and armed. Conner and Dardy had a 15-minute head start before the marshals managed to free themselves and inform the local police about the incident. When the news of Terry Conner and Joseph Dardy reached the courthouse of Oklahoma City, Steve Chenoweth, who was also present there for the criminal's trial, was shocked. Terry Conner and Joseph Dardy didn't go into complete hiding after escaping from police custody, rather resumed their criminal activities shortly after. A few months after their escapes, 2 small-scale bank robberies were reported in St. Louis, and the pattern of the crimes matched that of Terry and Dardy's. The robbers had stolen nearly $30,000 cash from both banks, which meant one thing: they were planning to come back out to do big robberies like before. Just 2 months later, the authorities in West Allis, Wisconsin, received a bank robbery call. The investigation revealed that $500,000 was robbed from the bank. It was the biggest bank robbery in the state's history. Special Agent Dan Kraft was assigned to the case when the police informed the FBI about the heist. The witness statements showed that the criminals were bolder than ever before because they had done nothing to conceal their identities. Terry Conner once even mentioned to the hostages that the FBI would know who the robbers were when the news reached them. Both Terry Conner and Joseph Dardy were placed on the FBI's 10 most wanted fugitives list. A few weeks later, the FBI arrested the man who was doing the lookout job for Terry and Dardy during their Wisconsin robbery. After 5 days of interrogation, the man finally admitted to having a link with Terry and Dardy. He told the agents everything he knew about the fugitives. How did they choose the banks they robbed? How did they travel using aliases? And how did they communicate with each other? In light of the new information, the FBI arrested another man, John Harris, who had helped Conner and Dardy in robbing banks earlier. Harris told the FBI that Conner and Terry were in Chicago and planning another bank robbery there. When the FBI reached their hotel, Dardy had already checked out, but Conner was still in his room. As soon as Terry Conner walked out of the hotel, he was arrested. Soon after his arrest outside the hotel, Joseph Dardy was also arrested from St. Louis. His arrest came after the FBI tapped his phone calls. As the verdict was read, a quiet relief washed over the courtroom. The FBI agents who had dedicated years to the case felt a weight lift from their shoulders, knowing justice had finally been served. For the victims, the sentencing marked the end of a dark chapter, a reassurance that their lives could finally return to normal. Terry Conner and Joseph Dardy were tried for their crimes. Both of them received 2 life sentences and 139 years in prison without parole. This was one of the most awaited verdicts, and one that marked an end to one of the most interesting manhunts in the FBI's history.